Have you ever felt the powerful stillness that descends upon the church when the priest raises the consecrated host? That sacred moment when time seems to stand still, when heaven and earth touch. This is the most transformative instant of the entire Mass, yet so many faithful miss its true spiritual potential. In those precious seconds, Christ himself is physically present before you, body, blood, soul, and divinity, offering himself completely for your salvation. But what most Catholics don't realize is that Padre Pio, the stigmatic saint whose connection to the supernatural realms was undeniable, revealed a special prayer to be whispered precisely during this holy elevation. This isn't just another devotional practice or pious tradition. This is a sacred key that unlocks divine graces so powerful that Padre Pio himself said, "In that moment, the floodgates of heaven open wide, waiting for your voice to reach the throne of God." Imagine attending Mass your entire life without knowing that during the elevation, there exists a direct line of communication with heaven, a moment when your prayers are received with special attention by the Lord himself. For decades, those close to Padre Pio witnessed how his entire being would transform during the consecration, how tears would stream down his face as he perceived spiritual realities invisible to ordinary eyes. Before revealing this powerful prayer that has transformed thousands of lives, I need you to understand something crucial about this teaching from Padre Pio. This isn't merely about reciting words. It's about recognizing and entering into the most sacred moment of cosmic history, repeated daily on our altars. When the priest elevates the host, heaven literally opens, angels bow in adoration, and Christ presents himself to the Father while simultaneously offering himself to you. Padre Pio could see this reality with his spiritual eyes, and his revelation allows us to participate more deeply in this divine exchange, even when our human perception fails to grasp the supernatural magnificence unfolding before us. What actually happens in the spiritual realm when the priest raises the consecrated host? According to Padre Pio's mystical insights, at that precise moment, the boundaries between heaven and earth dissolve. During the elevation, he once confided to a spiritual son, the altar is surrounded by angels kneeling in adoration, saints gather in reverence, and souls in purgatory experience momentary relief from their suffering. This isn't poetic imagery or symbolic language. Padre Pio experienced these realities with his extraordinary spiritual gifts. He would often remain in ecstasy during this part of the Mass, his face reflecting a light not of this world, as he witnessed Christ's sacrifice made present again. Your presence at this moment places you at the foot of Calvary itself. Just as Mary, John, and the holy women stood before the cross 2,000 years ago, you stand before the same sacrifice made present on the altar. The difference is that while they witnessed the suffering, you witnessed the glory. Padre Pio understood that most believers fail to recognize this opportunity. They attend Mass without truly understanding the cosmic drama unfolding before their eyes. Their minds wander, their hearts remain distant, and they miss the chance to participate in the most powerful channel of grace available on earth. "How my heart aches," Padre Pio once said, "when I see souls standing distracted before the King of Kings, unaware of the treasures being offered to them." The spiritual muscle that allows us to perceive and engage with this sacred moment is faith. Padre Pio taught that when we strengthen this muscle through intentional practice, our experience of the Mass transforms completely. Instead of merely watching a ritual, you begin to participate in a divine encounter. Instead of passively attending, you actively receive. The prayer Padre Pio revealed isn't magical in itself. Its power comes from how it positions your soul at this critical moment, opening your spiritual senses to receive what heaven is already pouring out. Think of it as adjusting the antenna of your soul to perfectly receive the divine broadcast that's always transmitting, but that most fail to tune into properly. The moment has come to share with you the prayer that Padre Pio himself would whisper during the elevation of the host. Simple words that carry immense spiritual power. "My Lord and my God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you. I ask pardon for those who do not believe, do not adore, do not hope, and do not love you." Notice the profound simplicity of this prayer. In just 24 words, it encompasses the entire spiritual life: faith, worship, hope, and love, the four fundamental responses of the human heart to divine presence. But Padre Pio didn't stop with personal devotion. He extended his prayer to intercession for those who remain distant from God. This dual movement, reaching toward God while simultaneously reaching toward others, creates a spiritual circuit that allows divine grace to flow not only into your life, but through you into the world. Why is this prayer so powerful specifically during the elevation? Because at that moment, Christ is not only present, but presented, offered to the Father and to the faithful. When you utter these words precisely as the host is raised, you're doing three essential things simultaneously: professing your faith in the real presence, offering your complete self through the four theological virtues, and participating in Christ's own redemptive mission through your intercession for others. Padre Pio explained that this prayer, when said with sincere faith at this exact moment, releases unique graces that remain dormant otherwise. It is not the length of the prayer that matters, he would say, but the intensity of the faith and the timing of the words. The saints understand what most of us forget, that in the spiritual life, timing is everything. There are moments when heaven's door opens wider, when divine generosity pours out more abundantly, and the elevation during Mass is the pinnacle of these opportunities. If you believe this teaching can transform your experience of the Mass as it has for thousands of devoted followers, write in the comments, "I am ready for this blessing." And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more profound spiritual insights that have the power to completely revolutionize your faith life. The wisdom of the saints isn't meant to remain hidden, it's meant to be lived and shared, so that all may benefit from these treasures of our Catholic heritage. To fully embrace this powerful teaching from Padre Pio, you must understand the three essential pillars that make this prayer so effective. The first pillar is attentiveness. Padre Pio insisted that during the elevation, every distraction must be banished. Your eyes must be fixed on the host, your mind centered on the miracle occurring before you, and your heart completely present to the divine mystery. In that moment, he would say, "Forget everything else. The world can wait. Heaven is present now." This requires preparation before Mass even begins, setting an intention to remain fully alert during the consecration, perhaps even reminding yourself with a gentle prayer as the offertory concludes, "Lord, help me to be fully present when you come." Attentiveness means training yourself to recognize the sound of the bell as a call to heightened awareness, a signal to shift from ordinary consciousness to sacred attentiveness. The second pillar is intentionality. The words of the prayer must not be merely recited but deeply meant. Each phrase, "I believe," "I adore," "I hope," "I love you," should express a genuine movement of your soul toward the elevated host. Padre Pio taught that intentionality transforms routine into encounter. When asked why so many Catholics experience little fruit from Mass attendance, he responded, "They are physically present but spiritually absent." Intentionality means connecting each word of the prayer with its corresponding interior disposition. As you say, "I believe," summon all your faith. As you say, "I adore," bow internally in worship. As you say, "I hope," renew your trust in divine promises. As you say, "I love you," let your heart expand with genuine affection for Christ present before you. This intentional alignment of word and heart creates a spiritual integrity that Padre Pio insisted was essential for the prayer's efficacy. The third pillar is intercessory charity. Notice how the prayer shifts from personal devotion, "I believe," to intercession for others, "I ask pardon for those who do not." Padre Pio emphasized that this movement from self to others mirrors Christ's own self-giving on the cross and in the Eucharist. The greatest prayer, he would say, is one that forgets itself in concern for others. By including intercession precisely at the moment of elevation, you participate in Christ's ongoing work of redemption. This intercessory dimension prevents the prayer from becoming merely private devotion and instead connects your worship with the universal mission of the Church. When practiced regularly, this habit of remembering others during the most sacred moment of Mass gradually reshapes your entire spiritual outlook, making intercession not just an occasional practice but a constant disposition of your heart. This powerful practice didn't originate with Padre Pio himself, though he was its most ardent modern promoter. The roots of this prayer stretch back to the Gospel of John, when Thomas encountered the risen Christ and exclaimed, "My Lord and my God," the very words that begin this elevation prayer. Throughout church history, there has been a special reverence for the moment of consecration. In medieval Europe, people would sometimes rush from church to church just to be present for this sacred moment, believing that even seeing the elevated host brought special blessings. By the 13th century, the elevation of the host became more pronounced in the liturgy, precisely to emphasize the miracle of transubstantiation and give the faithful an opportunity for focused adoration. Padre Pio stood in this long tradition, but with the advantage of his mystical sight. What ordinary believers accepted on faith, he actually witnessed with spiritual perception. During Mass, attendees would often notice that Padre Pio's expression would completely transform during the consecration. His face would reflect intensely changing emotions, sometimes joy, sometimes sorrow, sometimes wonder, as he beheld the mysteries unfolding before him. One witness recorded, "It was as though he was seeing something no one else could see, his eyes fixed on a reality beyond our perception." This testimony aligns with Padre Pio's own rare descriptions of his experiences, when he would reluctantly admit to seeing Christ himself present at the altar, sometimes as the suffering Savior, sometimes as the glorified Lord. What makes Padre Pio's advocacy for this elevation prayer so compelling is that it comes from direct experience rather than mere theological speculation. He wasn't recommending a practice he had simply read about or heard from others. He was sharing what he had discovered through his extraordinary spiritual sensitivity. "When you say these words at the elevation," he once counseled a spiritual daughter, "imagine yourself standing not before bread, but before Christ enthroned in glory, yet making himself vulnerable in love for you." This instruction reflects Padre Pio's understanding that while we may not share his mystical vision, we can cultivate a similar spiritual attitude, one that penetrates beyond appearances to encounter the divine reality present on the altar. His insistence on this particular prayer wasn't arbitrary, but flowed from his direct perception of how souls could most effectively connect with the elevated host. The power of this simple practice has been confirmed through countless testimonies from those who have faithfully implemented it. Consider Maria from Naples, who had attended Mass routinely for 40 years, without feeling any particular connection to the Eucharist. After learning about Padre Pio's elevation prayer and practicing it consistently for just 1 month, she described an extraordinary shift. "It's as though I had been standing outside a locked room for decades, and suddenly someone showed me the key that was in my pocket all along. Now, the moment of elevation has become the highlight of my week, a personal encounter that sustains me through all difficulties." Her experience is not unusual. Many report that this focused moment of prayer gradually transforms their entire experience of the Mass from obligation to anticipation. Even more remarkably, this practice often extends its influence beyond the church walls. Giovanni, a businessman from Milan, shared how the regular practice of Padre Pio's elevation prayer gradually altered his perception of everyday encounters. "After 6 months of saying this prayer at every Mass, I began to recognize Christ's presence not just in the elevated host, but in the faces of people I would previously ignore: the homeless man outside my office, the difficult colleague, the challenging family member." This experience aligns perfectly with Padre Pio's teaching that authentic Eucharistic devotion should always translate into expanded charity. The saint would often say, "You cannot claim to recognize Christ in the consecrated bread if you fail to see him in the suffering brother." Perhaps most powerful are the testimonies of spiritual breakthrough that come from this practice. Lucia, who had struggled with persistent doubts about the real presence despite years of Catholic practice, described her experience. "During a particularly difficult period of spiritual dryness, I committed to saying Padre Pio's prayer at every elevation for 1 full year, even though I felt nothing. Around the 9th month, during an ordinary weekday Mass, as the priest elevated the host and I whispered those familiar words, something broke open within me. For the first time, I didn't just believe intellectually that Christ was present, I knew it with a certainty that transcended all my previous doubts." Such testimonies confirm what Padre Pio insisted, that faithful practice often precedes feeling, and that spiritual breakthroughs come not to those who wait for inspiration, but to those who persevere in practices that position them to receive grace. Despite its simplicity, many find it challenging to implement this practice consistently. The most common obstacle is distraction. You may find that precisely at the moment of elevation, your mind suddenly floods with irrelevant thoughts, shopping lists, work concerns, or random memories. Padre Pio understood this difficulty and offered practical advice. Begin preparing your heart from the start of the Eucharistic prayer. Let each part of the prayer be a step bringing you closer to full attention. He suggested using the moments of kneeling after the Sanctus as a time of mental preparation, quietly repeating, "Lord, help me to be fully present when you come." This gradual narrowing of focus creates a momentum of attention that can carry you through the critical moment of elevation with greater presence. Another obstacle is routine. After practicing this elevation prayer for weeks or months, you might find yourself reciting the words mechanically, without the initial fervor. Padre Pio anticipated this challenge and counseled, "When devotion becomes routine, don't abandon it, renew it. Change not the practice but your approach to it." His suggestion was to periodically focus on different aspects of the prayer, one week emphasizing the "I believe" with particular intensity, another week dwelling especially on "I love you," and so forth. Additionally, he recommended occasionally adding your specific intentions silently after the traditional words, "My Lord and my God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you. I ask pardon for those who do not believe, do not adore, do not hope, and do not love you. And today, I especially entrust to you." This small adaptation keeps the prayer fresh while maintaining its essential structure. Perhaps the most subtle obstacle is skepticism, the quiet doubt that such a simple practice could really matter so much. In a church culture sometimes fixated on elaborate devotions and complex spiritual programs, the stark simplicity of Padre Pio's elevation prayer can seem almost too basic to be truly powerful. To this objection, Padre Pio would respond with characteristic directness. The deepest truths are always the simplest. It is human pride that craves complexity. He frequently reminded his spiritual children that Christ himself reduced all commandments to love of God and neighbor, that the greatest saints were often those of greatest simplicity, and that spiritual sophistication is frequently the enemy of authentic devotion. "Do you think God is impressed by elaborate words?" he once asked a doubtful penitent. "He looks only at the sincerity of the heart. Better a simple prayer said with complete conviction than a theological discourse without love." Once you've established the habit of praying during the elevation, there are ways to progressively deepen this practice. The first level of deepening involves extending your attention beyond the moment itself. Padre Pio taught that while the elevation represents the peak moment of the consecration, the divine presence doesn't suddenly arrive and then depart. Rather, it intensifies during the elevation, but continues throughout the Eucharistic prayer. He encouraged the faithful to maintain an attitude of adoration from the beginning of the consecration until after communion, creating a sustained spiritual climate rather than a momentary spike of devotion. This doesn't mean continuously reciting prayers but cultivating a consistent awareness that you are in the presence of a miracle, allowing that knowledge to inform your entire participation in the liturgy. A second level of deepening involves what Padre Pio called spiritual communion with the eyes. Since ancient times, the Church has recognized that spiritual communion, the desire for union with Christ when actual reception isn't possible, carries significant grace. Padre Pio expanded this concept by teaching that the reverent gaze upon the elevated host constitutes a form of communion itself. When you look upon the host with faith, he explained, something of Christ enters your soul through your eyes, not his body, as in sacramental communion, but his blessing, his acknowledgement of your faith. This understanding transforms the visual experience of the elevation from mere observation to a genuine exchange, your gaze of faith meeting Christ's gaze of love. To practice this, as you recite the elevation prayer, consciously open yourself to receive through your reverent seeing, imagining Christ's blessing flowing from the host into your soul. The ultimate deepening of this practice leads to what Padre Pio described as Eucharistic living. The grace received during those sacred moments of elevation should gradually transform your entire life into an extension of the Mass. If the prayer at elevation is authentic, Padre Pio taught, its effects will not be confined to those few seconds but will radiate into every aspect of your day. He would challenge his spiritual children. Can you say, "I believe" during the elevation on Sunday, then live as a practical atheist on Monday? Can you say, "I love you" to Christ in the host, then refuse love to those he sends into your path? True devotion to this practice should progressively dissolve the boundaries between liturgy and life, sacred and secular, until your entire existence becomes a continuous response to the Eucharistic gift, a perpetual, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you, expressed not just in words at Mass, but in choices, attitudes, and actions throughout the week. The moment of decision has arrived. You've learned about the extraordinary opportunity that presents itself at every Mass, that sacred instant when the priest elevates the host and heaven opens its gates to your prayer. You've discovered the simple yet profound words that Padre Pio himself would whisper at this moment, words that encapsulate the entire response of the human heart to divine presence, faith, worship, hope, love, and intercessory charity. You've explored the historical foundations of this practice, heard testimonies of its transformative power, considered strategies for overcoming common obstacles, and glimpsed the depths to which this simple devotion can lead. Now, what will you do with this knowledge? Tonight, before you sleep, make a firm resolution to implement this practice at the very next Mass you attend. Don't wait for a special occasion or a moment when you feel particularly spiritual. Padre Pio was emphatic that in spiritual matters, action must precede feeling, not follow it. Begin with determination, he would say, and devotion will follow. Perhaps write the words of the prayer on a small card to keep in your missal or prayer book, or set a reminder on your phone to help you remember your intention before Mass begins. Tell someone else about your commitment, a spouse, a friend, a family member, as sharing your spiritual resolution both strengthens your determination and extends the blessing to others who might adopt the practice themselves. Remember that each person who embraces this devotion becomes another voice calling out to heaven at that sacred moment, another heart united with Christ's self-offering. What awaits you is nothing less than a gradual transformation of your experience of the Mass, and through it, your entire spiritual life. Padre Pio promised that faithful adherence to this practice would eventually lead to what he called Eucharistic consciousness, a heightened awareness of divine presence that extends beyond the church walls into everyday encounters and ordinary moments. Begin with these few seconds of focused prayer, he would counsel, and eventually every moment of your life will become a form of communion. This is not spiritual hyperbole, but the testimony of countless individuals who have followed this path before you. The elevation of the host is not merely a liturgical action to be witnessed, but a cosmic event to be entered, a divine invitation extended personally to you at every Mass you attend. Do not let another consecration pass without responding with the full attention of your heart. My Lord and my God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you. I ask pardon for those who do not believe, do not adore, do not hope, and do not love you.